And then let's get to Jonathan Hunt. He is live in Tel Aviv this morning. Hi, Jonathan.
Good morning to you, Dana. Iran remains defiant in both its actions and words. That, despite the words of President Trump and despite the actions of the U.S. military, which continues to bombard targets across Tehran and indeed across the country. Military infrastructure, the main focus of the U.S. And despite the words of CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, who said on X today, quote, "Now in our fifth week of the campaign, it is my operational assessment that we are making undeniable progress. We don't see their Navy sailing. We don't see their aircraft flying, and their air and missile defense systems have largely been destroyed." And in Isfahan, Iran, where one of Iran's major nuclear plants is based, flames are still burning from strikes that happened there a couple of days ago. But despite all that, Iranian officials seem determined to continue fighting. They say there will be no surrender. They do not want the ceasefire President Trump said they asked for, and they will go on with this war. Listen here.
This war will continue until your humiliation, disgrace, lasting regret, and eventual surrender are certain. Following the continuation of the heavy and unimaginable blows and strikes you have already received, expect even more forceful, broader, and more destructive actions from us.
And emphasizing that point of destructive actions, Iran launched one of its most intense missile barrages of this war as Israelis prepared for the Jewish holiday of Passover yesterday. There was damage across large parts of Tel Aviv and other areas in Israel. Dozens of people were injured. So as far as Iran is concerned, this war goes on this morning, Dana.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan Hunt.
I want to bring in Rebecca Heinrichs, Hudson Institute Senior Fellow. Rebecca, good morning and welcome to our coverage here. Wall Street Journal editorial board, they write it up this way. President Trump on Wednesday made the case for going to war with Iran that he should have made at the outset, but it was still essential for Americans to hear it. The most important message we heard is that he's not ending the war until the job is done, and Iran's leaders will be wise to act accordingly. In your belief, he did three things last night. You said first was to explain to the American people. So go ahead and explain to us what you heard last night in that 18-minute address.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I think that the primary audience for the president's speech was the broad American public. For those Americans who are not watching the day in and day out updates from Admiral Cooper, from President Trump, from Secretary Hegseth, they need to know what is the purpose of the war, how are we doing, and are we safer? And so I think President Trump primarily spoke to them, and he informed them that he made sure that the economy was strong before we went into this war, and that we were energy not just independent, but dominant, so that we could absorb some of the short-term energy spikes in prices. And then also, of course, he conveyed that Americans are safer now, 4 weeks into this war, than we were before, and your children are safer now because of Epic Fury. I think that is the most important message he sent to the American people.
One of the issues that is causing the rise in prices is the Strait of Hormuz, and this is what President Trump said last night about other countries needing to step up.
To those countries that can't get fuel, many of which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran. We had to do it ourselves. I have a suggestion. Number one, buy oil from the United States of America. We have plenty. We have so much. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Should have done it before. Should have done it with us, as we asked. Go to the Strait and just take it. Protect it. Use it for yourselves. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done, so it should be easy. And in any event, when this conflict is over, the Strait will open up.
Rebecca, one of the things he said there is that with the allies, they should have done it before and they should have done it with us as we asked. Do we know if the United States asked those European allies and NATO to pitch in at the outset?
No, I think, Dana, that actually is a point where the Europeans are frustrated that they didn't know what the United States plans were. They were not asked to participate, and so that's part of their frustration. I do think that this kind of gets to my second point that Bill and I were talking about, which is, this war, President Trump said, is going to be much shorter. He provided some historical context of these longer wars, and I think the opening up the Strait of Hormuz he's kind of hinting that this is going to be something that's going to have to happen after we finish our primary objectives, which is to really weaken the Iranians' ability to project power outside its borders. And then you're going to see, I think the plan is, an international coalition to escort these tankers kind of through the Strait of Hormuz and to open that up. But that's going to be, I think, something that's going to happen from the president's perspective now after we finish our primary objectives, because he does want other allies to participate in that.
I think it's a very good point, and we'll see how that develops. He did not go after NATO partners last night. I thought that was somewhat significant. However, you still have what he called nuclear dust, about 1,000 pounds of it. And can you exit this military conflict without acquiring it or accounting for it, Rebecca?
Well, I think that's the other little piece that he hinted at to temper expectations, Bill, and that's that he said it would take months because of the success of the United States doing Midnight Hammer, where we really degraded those nuclear sites. And now the third point, he said, even though this war is going to be limited in our objectives, the next several weeks are not going to be tempered. We are going to be hitting the Iranians very hard. I would expect that that includes these nuclear sites. So if the president has decided we do not have essentially the bandwidth and the ability at this point to go in and do a larger ground operation to extract this nuclear material, we're going to make sure that we render it unable for the Iranians to access or to use. That seems to be what he's implying, but of course the president doesn't like to limit his options, so he didn't preclude the possibility of other options, but he was kind of, I think, trying to manage expectations there.
Yeah, it's hard. Imagine like threading the needle where you have a speech where you're trying to give reassurance and clarity to the American people, but keep the Iranians guessing. It's not an easy needle to thread. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.